So it's official. The engine's coming out. I'm gonna do it. I don't even care. Gotta come out. I've already got pretty much everything disconnected anyway. What's a couple more things? I gotta replace a ton of hoses. I gotta replace electrical connectors, figure out AC compressor, figure out the power steering pump. It's just a lot, but it's gotta come out. I think that's the call. I'm gonna replace the timing, head gaskets. I'm gonna replace the valve cover gaskets. I'm gonna replace the intake manifold gaskets, upper and lower. I'm gonna replace the oil pan gaskets, upper and lower. I'm gonna replace the rear main seal, get a good look at the clutch and the transmission, and I'm gonna clean everything up like a freaking madman, like I do, and then I'm gonna put it all back together. I'm not excited about it. While we're at it, get this thing out where I can see it, clean up the engine bay. I'll get this rolled out of here with the engine out, you know, and if I can have all the right stuff in a week to run on this thing, I should have it all done, all right, you know? Jokes. Anyway, that's where my head's at. I'm gonna get started right now, and I'll let you know. So I just removed the fuel rail back here where it connects. I don't think this soft line is connected anywhere back here. This was connected on the back of the intake manifold, but that's already gone. Got this electrical, I think, already disconnected really and ready to go. This thing's crusty. EGR is gonna come off with the manifold. I'm gonna go back and disconnect where the headers connect to the exhaust. I already got them PB blasted. We're moving on. I got a list here. All right, so I drained the transfer case fluid. Found the transmission drain plug, so I'm gonna drain the transmission. I'm moving on. I'm getting the drive shafts out. All right, I got the front drive shaft out. I'm clean this thing up, stick it back in. U-joints seem just fine. Alright, so I'm back here underneath the car, trying to get these drive shaft bolts off. They're coming, they're not easy, but... Let's see here, remove drive shafts. I'm done. Disconnect soft connections. There's a bunch of them. That's one thing I didn't write here. Starter. So now I'm removing the shifters. Got the knob. And I removed the center console. Literally comes out with 2 screws underneath behind the door. I removed this front cover plate, which you just slide the ashtray out. There's 1 screw behind it. The whole thing comes off with clips. Then I'm gonna remove this cover. There's 3 Phillips around the outside and 2 bolts on these studs. This cover should come off and I should be able to remove the shifters. So it's got this rubber seal. Nice. Alright, so this whole shifter assembly cover can come off. Oh, look at that! Ton of room down in there. Alright, so if you were wondering what this looks like, here we go. Down in here I got the 4-wheel drive selector. That won't do nothing until you're actually in 4-wheel drive. And then we got the, let's see, we got a faulty boot down here. This thing was all wiggly. I might be able to give it some adjustment and get it to be a little more firm, but just fine. Yeah, this boot's faulty too. All the rubber on this car has been bad. Look, I can even get to the bolts that hold some of the stuff back there. Anyway, it says take the bolts out and the shifters lift straight up, so that's what I'm gonna do. There's just a little thing down there that the end of the shifter slots into. So this is the end that slots down in. It's got kind of a ball jointy effect here. And then the shaft comes up through. There's this support that falls in there that allows it to, you know, be on a ball. And then there's the bracket that bolts it down. And then there's the rubber gasket. That would probably keep dirt from getting in there, but my rubber gasket was torn. Transfer case came out real easy. 2 bolts. The end is like a little ball there. It's got this plastic glide. This one has an oil seal, rubber O-ring, and it's all real clean. I moved these electrical connectors here. I believe that's the vehicle speed sensor. But there's 2 here which I believe hold on O2 sensors. There's a couple more brackets up there that I think I can get to from the bottom side. I'm gonna remove any brackets that are attached holding. That looks like the bracket that holds fuel lines back there. Fuel lines that run through the cross member, which I'm not too sure what's going on there, but I think I'll just have bolts on there. I'm gonna work on all these soft connections just so we're keeping track. Just got this bracket bolt off. There's two little electrical connectors up there. I'm gonna get those. We got that bolt to the fuel lines to the bracket disconnected. There's two little electrical connectors up there I gotta get that go to the wiring harness that connect down to probably the parking brake sensor. These bolts are actually missing. These connect these fuel lines to a bracket to this cross member. Fuel lines will then stay. This cross member can come out. I still gotta work on the other side. I think there's some connectors over there too. So I was able to disconnect. Pretty sure this is the vehicle speed sensor back here on the, right in front of the Alpha shaft. I was able to get this connector disconnected. This rolls down to what I believe is the shifter. It shifts the transmission into 4x4. There's one here that I haven't done yet. I gotta get this connector. This connects the fuel lines to this bracket to the transmission. Oh, and then I'm probably gonna have to get the what is that? The clutch pedal, hydraulic clutch, this thing that connects at, I believe I disconnected there. Engine removal. Remove the transmission cross member and transmission with the engine supported by an overhead hoist. Where I'm at over here, getting the transmission out and the transfer case. I'm here at support the engine, and then I can get the transmission and transfer case out. So in my support the engine journey, I bought a crane. I got it on the cheap, used, a little bent, a little dented, but it seems to be functioning as it should. So I'm gonna go ahead and support the engine. I'm gonna take this one up and try to drop it through the ceiling so that I can support the engine without having these big feet sticking underneath the car, because I'm gonna need the transmission to come out the front once I lower it down and it's ready to come out. So I'm gonna get this hoist set up right now. So I'm in the barn. This thing had this overhead hoist setup already installed. Not quite sure the weight capacity, but we're gonna find out. I got a chain hooked up right there, and then I got a hook and another chain, and I got this one bolted here, and I got this hooked out of the way, and I got my hoist hooked here, and now this chain is gonna drop through, and I'll be able to spin this thing from down below and hopefully hoist up the engine while I remove the transmission and the transfer case. Isn't this great? I got the hoist coming through. I had to lift the wiring harness up and behind the hoist, engine leveler thing, and in order to get that behind the engine, this whole wiring harness, I had to remove the heater because the wiring harness lays down right across beneath the intake manifold. The engine mounts, bolts that thread in there to the engine mount. I got them off. There was only one on this side. The other one was finger tight. Both of them were finger tight on the other side. Well, that might have been some of the clunking I was experiencing. Starter motor. I'm gonna start by getting just those two bolts out. I ended up pulling the engine mounts out entirely, which, wouldn't you know it, totally frees up space to get the starter out. They're pretty hard to get to, not gonna lie to you. Remove the transfer case skid plate, got that out. Remove the transmission mount to cross member nuts, and remove the cross member bolts, and remove the cross member. I'm gonna break those all loose, and then I'm gonna support everything. Then I'm gonna remove all the bolts. Alright, the next thing I'm gonna do here is get these cross member bolts out. Now I've already got all the nuts that hold the stuff to the cross member. And there. Alright, with the engine supported, I got the transfer case and transmission supported via a jack and a block. I got transmission / transfer case cross member out. That's what the mount looks like right there. Drilled 2 holes in this 2x4. And the the transmission cross-member bolts actually thread down through the this 2x4, so I'm not too worried about that slipping off. Alright, so there were just a couple of things that I didn't get a very good shot of when I was getting the engine out. I wanted to show you now something about this clutch assembly. So here we're looking at it out of the vehicle. We got the flywheel back here. We got the clutch disc itself, the splines here that mate to the transmission. Then we got the pressure plate here, and installed in the pressure plate is this pull type bearing, but it's clipped back behind the pressure plate, and it pulls on this diaphragm to release the clutch. Your fork is in here. And so what you gotta do is, with this in the vehicle, you need to get a screwdriver down in between to release this, whatever, this bearing. You gotta get it released off of the pressure plate itself, and it'll come out still stuck to the clutch fork. You can access that while the transmission is still up through this little sight window here. This is where your slave cylinder comes in there. This is where your starter will be. But you're gonna have to get a long flathead screwdriver through this hole up beneath the clutch fork here and get that pull type bearing released. Coming in at this sort of angle here. If this is pulled out, this will not release. You will not be able to get it to come out, because this little ring back here, if it's pulled out like this, it won't let those fingers back there release. But if it's pushed in here, you can see it'll give you some space to get this released. You don't want to pull out too hard on the transmission, because it'll pull the bearing and then you won't be able to get it released. What you need to do is, there's a little sight window. You gotta run this up in. Make sure this isn't pulled out. You gotta have it pressed. Run this up in between this, and you should be able to twist and pop this out of the ring. It's really not that hard once you figure it out, but if you don't get it right, you're gonna have a hard time getting the transmission out. Hope that helps. One other thing to note when getting the transmission out was there are these 3 brackets that connect. This one connects on the bottom of the transmission. You don't have to really worry too much about that one, but it's good to get it off. There's these 2 other brackets that connect between the engine and the transmission. These small bolt holes here, but if you don't get them off, it's gonna give you a hard time getting the transmission loose from the engine. Keep an eye out for them. If your engine's covered in gunk, they might be hard to find, but there's definitely 2 that you need to remove before you slide the transmission away from the engine. I got the transmission leaning back. I'm gonna try and get the bell housing to engine bolts. Wish me luck. And then I'm gonna be able to slide the transmission and transfer case back and lower it down. So we'll see how all that goes. I'm really just trying to get this thing out without it falling on me, so that's gonna be my biggest hurdle right now. Just don't kill myself. Anyway, we're getting it all out one way or the other. Whether or not I'll be able to get it back in is a whole nother story. I'm hoping I can just get this thing lifted out. It's basically there. All the coolant from the heater core hoses spilled into the valley right here. That's gonna make a mess, guaranteed. And this has been a nightmare, but we're almost there. How convenient. Now would you look at that? A whole day. More than a whole day. Mostly because I'm done. But it's out. Bell housing. Yeah, this whole thing's not made to be... It's not divorced. It's just one piece. It's out though. I don't know how I'll get this thing back in. That was insane. This is all looking pretty rough. Yeah. Bolts down there. I probably dropped dirt down in the valves. I don't know how long it took me to do that, but it was way too long. I'm happy that it's done though. Just slid that out. I tried way too hard to get it out in a way that wasn't what I just did, but I got it out. On the bolt, on the wood. Yes, they probably scraped the drain bolt a little bit, but you know what? It's out. Clean it up. Clean it up. All new gaskets. Potentially a new clutch. Get all that room. If only I didn't have to worry about smog, I wouldn't even put this thing back in. I'd put a little eco diesel in or something. And a doubler. Anyway, what I gotta do now is make dinner. Thanks for watching. Well, that's all for today's episode. Consider checking out some of my previous episodes. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing so you can join us next time when we continue tearing this engine down so we can give it the refresh it deserves. Thanks for joining us.